The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Victoria Jones from Satoshi's Page.
Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1, Knots Hard Fork. According to leaked text messages shared with The Rage, Luke Dashjr plans to hard fork Knots to, quote, save Bitcoin. The hard fork would have a, quote, trusted multisig committee that would retrospectively alter the blockchain to, quote, remove illicit content. It looks like the end for Knots as they've made their own attention to hard fork. The text messages are right here. It says, he says, not sure if I'll get a chance before November, too busy trying to save Bitcoin. And at the bottom it says, trying to come up with migration strategies for the risk CSAM gets mined. So my thought is after a block is identified as having CSAM, flag that one and use a ZK pour. Technically a hard fork, but since it's buried, should be safe. A hard fork for Bitcoin Knots. Victoria Jones, what do you think? We discussed Knots just a few weeks ago, went back and forth, but now it looks like they're ready to go their own way with Bitcoin Knots.
Yeah, I think I said last time I was on that that might end up being the solution because obviously, we're getting to a situation here where, opinions are very opposed. And so in those sorts of situations, if you can't reach a compromise, if both people are very entrenched in their positions, then, it's going to go either way. And this was the way in which Bitcoin was designed. So, yep, it looks like we might have another civil war on our hands.
I don't think it's going to be a civil war. I think it's going to be over in about 5 minutes. I think this is just this, and then I think it's similar to the Bitcoin 2x fork, where all the companies were on one side and all there was on the other side was mad Bitcoins and a few other people, and we won, and they all went away. And then 2 weeks later, the code that would have become Bitcoin 2x crashed anyway. So it would have been a disaster for everyone. I think this is the same thing happening in obvious slow motion to begin with. What is this committee? What is this nonsense? Who is going to determine what is what? Who's going to elect this committee? Who's going to trust them? Oh my goodness, we went down a complete organization rabbit hole, as we often do with libertarian ideas, which usually turn out to be disasters. It's fun to talk about in a laboratory philosophically, but anytime they try to implement anything, it ends up like this. There's now a multi-sig committee, Luke Jr.'s magic committee. I don't know what he's doing. I totally agree with this tweet by Callie BTC, who's been all over this on Twitter at Callie BTC. She says, now that the Knots mob has realized how much nasty stuff is already stored on their own holy nodes at home, the narrative now is that there's not so bad CSAM split into multiple transactions and bad CSAM, which fits into a single transaction. She says, this is what anthropology must feel like, including a picture of Jane Goodall with binoculars saying, fascinating behavior. Victoria, what do you think? We talked about this a few weeks ago. I mentioned it again. These nodes are already full of garbage. The text is already there. You can combine the text together. You can probably make a nasty image. I don't have time for that. No one else does. The blockchain is not a way to distribute things. Even if it becomes that way, it's really not like designed for that. It's designed to send money around, which already supports crazy projects that we don't support already. What do you think about Callie's tweet and the idea that, yes, Virginia, there's already bad stuff on your node, not to mention all the transactions?
Well, I thought the tweet was a bit dismissive, really, and it only really kind of paints a surface parodied view of what's actually going on. I've actually looked into it a bit more since I was last on, and it would appear to be the issue appears to be that when images like this are broken up into small chunks, there's plausible deniability for Bitcoiners running their own nodes. However, if you get to a stage where you can embed a whole image, that becomes a whole different ballgame. I don't think any of these images even even split into small sections are a good idea. All things in the universe carry a spiritual energy, and even if you break it down into small pieces on a blockchain, you're inculcating something into the very nature of what it is that we're trying to develop that is antithetical to it. I mean, if we're trying to achieve the moral high ground by having a better form of money, to contaminate it with that kind of data, whether it's split into small pieces or it's actual large images, this feels, you know, were always going to go after Bitcoin's weaknesses. We've seen this over and over again. Initially, they tried to find who Satoshi was because he kept himself anonymous. He wasn't able to. Then they've had, hard forks in the past where, it was against the miners and the general public. And, generally speaking, Bitcoin has been very robust. But all of these cryptocurrencies rely on their narrative. And part of the strength of Bitcoin's narrative is the fact that it's money for the people. But if you've got something that's embedding images and data that's fundamentally against the nature of humanity, you're creating you're creating a problem there. Um, so yeah, I think it's a problem. And of course, at the moment, it's all very esoteric. People are kind of talking about it as only the software developers. If you're an average Bitcoin, you probably don't really understand, what's going on here. And so the tendency is to kind of think, well, these things have happened before, it's no big deal. But all you need is for, some tabloid to get hold of the fact that these are the images that can be found on Bitcoin and extract them more easily than they've done in the past. And you have that slapped all over the papers. It's the reputation of Bitcoin will just be completely tanked. And it's Bitcoin's reputation that's keeping the money afloat. So it's actually a really big deal. It's the software and the way in which the software is designed that, we've been trusting the developers in order to actually do this in an honorable way. And we believed it because it started off so well. But the fact that it's got to the stage where, people have a really big problem with what's happening and that's not being listened to. Um, and so changes aren't being made and it's having to come down to a hard fork. This is a problem. I mean, I think Jed said a couple of weeks ago, when he was on, about the fact that there is a problem with Bitcoin's governance, the fact that they could introduce this and it took a number of months for it to kind of reach the stage where this was being properly debated and people really started to understand the implications of this thing. I mean, this is Bitcoin. Core 30 is meant to be released next week, and it's not been resolved. The problem is just getting worse and worse. Um, and it's got to the stage now with, rather than Bitcoin Core backing down and saying, okay, we can see that, 25% of the network has a problem with this because they're running knots. Even if there is a problem with knots, we need to step back and have a conversation. I think to not even do that out of respect for the fact that, there are people who are really upset about this and we need to have a compromise. It's not so much the fact that there's a problem. Okay, someone can introduce an idea and it might be a really bad idea or it might be a really good idea, but the whole idea behind Bitcoin was the fact that there would be some collaboration and there would be some discussion, and if there were problems it would be sorted out. But from what I can tell, Bitcoin Core has really taken the high road here and refused to listen to anyone else. And I think that's really problematic. And the fact that, they're now being pushed into this situation where it's only one or the other, I think is it's not good. I don't think it's good at all.
Well, first, I'm not sure that they have 25% of the network. I've heard that one data center in Berlin is running all their nodes, and it's similar to the Bcash discussion where they kept pumping up the values of Bcash and they kept saying they had all this stuff, but in the end, they didn't have it. As horrible as it might sound, Victoria, what do you think of the idea that the core developers think that they're smarter than everyone? And in the case of this niche thing of the Bitcoin software, they might be smarter than everyone. So they're not going to change their mind. They're not going to slow down because they don't really care what the 25% or the 5% or whatever percentage it is thinks or cares, because they only care about the software. Like essentially that they're kind of autistic. that they're very singular focused, and that they don't care. And what do you think? Starting from there, that they, it's not,
I think that's a problem.
it's a communication problem, but
Yeah.
in a way, it's like also it's exactly how they are. Like they exactly don't care. Like they're not going to leave this platform. They're going to post here. They're going to post the long message. They're going to use markup language or whatever. They're not going to merge to your platform. They're not going to make a press release. Like they're not going to like figure out how to explain this to the community. They're just going to do it because they think it's the best for the software. Like, and that might brush people the wrong way, but for making the software, if that might be the best way, right?
But the thing is, if they can do it with this, what else are they going to do it with? I mean, certainly when I bought into Bitcoin, it was about the fact that, you can't make changes on the software. It's very hard to make changes on the software, and it needs to be, you need consensus in order to make that kind of change. Now, I know someone's commented the fact that it's not a consensus change, but when it's affecting people this strongly, it still makes a difference. It's a change that's going to have a material effect. It might not be something that requires a hard fork, but if it's a soft fork that a number of people disagree with, and even by introducing a filter, it's not going to solve the problem anyway, because, even if knots are running their nodes, it's not going to, if core 30 is introduced and they're allowing that data to be on the network, once the miners have allowed it into the blockchain, it doesn't matter if you run a Bitcoin knots node. That's not going to solve the problem. So to have something that's this contentious and to not even discuss it, that's, apart from anything else, regardless of this individual issue, that
But
sets a
what if
really
it's
dangerous
not? What if
precedent.
it's not really so contentious? It's not going to be easy to upload an image. It's not going to be cheap to upload an image. I don't think it's going to be that easy to download an image. I think that a lot of focus has gotten in on this whole CP thing, and you start waving the flag, and now we have CSAM. I don't know, there's a zillion acronyms. No one even wants to say the words anymore. But if we just put that to the side, it's just a small technical change. I don't think people are going to upload images. And again, we're already hosting money for the world. We're already monetarily supporting all kinds of horrible causes. Like I'm still like the anthropologist lady sitting back here, like I'm wearing a pirate hat. Like I am a pirate. Like this is a pirate monetary network. We're in a crazy time where Wall Street is adopting it, and all these people who hated us in the beginning are all now on board. That's not going to last, right? The Trojan horse is inside the walls. The Greeks are still inside the horse, and all the Trojans are like, what a nice horse. Whoa, look at the decorations on this Bitcoin. I mean, the Christian CSAM, CPAP, anti-people, CP people, they just seem like more of these ridiculous Trojans. Like they're not really on board with the plan of the Greeks, the Bitcoiners inside. They're going to wreck everything. The network's going to wreck everything. Like the idea where we just talk about, oh, the dollar losing its global reserve currency, and we just pass over that wrecks everything. The idea that it wrecks sanctions, like that Iran and Russia or whoever you disagree with can now get around sanctions, that wrecks everything. And I'm sure that it wrecks certainly the FBI could track Bitcoin. It's a very open network at this time, but in the future, Bitcoin that's hidden, Zcash, whatever it's going to be, could fund all kinds of horrible CP things, right? With actual money, like actual support, like give them a house to abuse people in, right? Actual support is so much worse than hosting an image.
But it's not just about the image. Are you familiar with the phrase the totalitarian tiptoe? It might just be a small change, and you might not think that it's a big deal, but the fact that they can do this and go over everyone's head, as you say, in a slightly autistic manner and kind of going, we're going to do this. We don't care about how that's more of the issue. I mean, yes, the images are an issue because that has the potential to be a PR disaster for Bitcoin. So it is a problem, regardless of what you think your
It's
religious
already
affiliation
there. It's already
are.
there. I mean, the images are already in there.
Not in the same way. Not in the same way. Yes, they're broken down into images, but not one that's as easily retrievable. And that has the potential to be a PR disaster. If you get a tabloid newspaper onto that, you'll just have a ton of people that will turn away from Bitcoin overnight
But
because they feel that
isn't
strongly
that
about
the
it.
whole thing, that Bitcoin is pirate money, and that All of
Yeah,
these
but
people, whether they're Wall Street people or Christian people or whoever they are, if you're not a cyberpunk, if you're not a libertarian, if you don't, if you're not okay with everything collapsing around you and Bitcoin rising up because of its superior technology, which is again how every other technology thing went. We all use the internet. Nobody reads newspapers. There's no card catalogs. MP3 wrecked the music industry. Streaming video formats wrecked the video industry. Why aren't we going to wreck banks and wreck stock markets? And when I mean wreck, I mean wreck. Like it's not, they're not going to be like, oh, it carries CP. They're going to be like, it's the goose that lays golden eggs. Keep mining it. And people already steal electricity. People already hide out with Bitcoin miners. Is it going to be forced underground? Inevitably, yes. I think that these people with their filters and their committees and their nonsense are in denial of what this project is really about. This is not to say Amir Taki's the leader, but his spirit, the revolutionary spirit of the cypherpunks and the libertarians, it's the core of the project. I think that the core people, by going ahead and not really caring what the non-technical people think, I think that's the project. I mean, when the corporate people tried to take it over, that wasn't the project, and the internet shifted it back, right? The internet's going to make the decision on this. The internet's going to rise up and decide, and I don't think the internet's with knots, especially the more complicated it gets with these committees and these single developer guy who seems a little radical and out of control. Obviously, there's going to be a knots 2, knots cash, knots Satoshi's vision. Like it's going to keep going. But once they start hard forking, they're just like, they're out of the group. Like they can go do their thing with their own thing. And I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from the snippets that we've been given, I mean, right at the end of that email exchange, Luke Just Jr. said that, that I think he'd been approached by a journalist and he said, whatever you've heard is complete lies. Even though it was snippets of text messages, those could have been taken out of context. It could just be ideas at the moment. He could just be floating ideas of what to do. The point is, he sees the problem as serious enough that something needs doing because he recognizes the potential for the PR disaster for Bitcoin that could be. So I'm not saying that he's come up with the perfect solution, and it may well. And yeah, I think the idea of a committee to filter out individual transactions. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster because Bitcoin's not meant to be able to work that way. But at the same time, Bitcoin Core being as dictatorial as they're being, that's a problem as well. Part of Bitcoin's reputation is the fact that it's a superior technology because it can't be hacked and it has a very clear set of rules. I mean, the thing is, if they could do this, who's to say at some point that they couldn't determine that the hard cap needs to increase, which is a big part of the narrative as to why people buy into Bitcoin. It's we've already got a problem. The reason why they need to address the issue of images on the blockchain in the first place is because it was a problem that was introduced when they upgraded to Taproot, because that's what allowed all the ordinals to get into the software. So, we kind of we're they're trying to design a
Well, and
solution for a
that's
problem that's
the
already
technical
been.
argument, right? They're saying that the ordinals and the runes or whatever, they're getting in without paying the miners. So they're getting in for free. So they need to have a system where they would be properly charged and they would shift these systems to the new system.
Well, regardless, the fact that they were allowed to in the
So
first
under the
place is.
current system, they can do it, right? They could put ordinals that are pornographic images. They could put really low res, little blocky, nudie images into the things. They could combine multiple runes, multiple ordinals together, right, to make a larger
But this
image that would be more offensive. Like it's the same thing. It's still the offensive data is already there. We're not, the
but the
purity
point I'm
test
make
is going to
the
fail. They're going
point
to
I'm
have to go
making is
back in time and take out data. They're going to have to go back in time and take out transactions. They're going to have
well,
to
yeah.
filter and monitor the whole world of data. They are the great, commanders of the network. This is a
Yeah, I've
terrible
already I've
idea.
already said
This
I
is a
don't think
terrible
not.
plan.
I've already said that that is not a good solution. But the point I'm making is the fact that Core is trying to do an update to correct problems that came with their previous update with Taproot. Ordinals were not a problem before then, and the fact that they're trying to correct the ordinals problem is now allowing for these additional images. And it's about the fact that each time I've seen an interview where Michael Saylor's made this point. This is the way governments start out. They start off by being having a great deal, having a number of ideals, but of course, by having control of the money, they're able to dictate which laws kind of come in and which don't. And over time, this kind of gets corrupted. And Bitcoin was meant to be designed in such a way that the design of the software was static, and apart from upgrades to kind of keep it going, it shouldn't really be messed with more than that. And we're reaching a stage where it is being messed with more than that, and it does not bode well for the future that we wanted. I mean, yes, we've got a problem with the fiat system, but we're going from the frying pan into the fire, because not only that, but you've also got a situation where Bitcoin can carry data. Who's to say that it can't also start carrying individual IDs, and that's used as a way of invading people's privacy and monitoring it. The governments have long had a plan for this. Obviously, they were trying to introduce it through their CBDCs, and they're now trying to go after that with stablecoins. But if they can get it on Bitcoin, so much the better, because that's the one that's seen as the libertarian option.
But
So
didn't they say this about the internet? Didn't they say that the internet was full of porn and that the internet was allowing child trafficking and that all these things were true about the internet? And now we
yeah,
still
but
have the internet. It
you're
got
missing the
bad press
point.
for years. It's the same thing though.
It's not
All
about
new
the
networks
images.
carry data. They carry things. It carries
It's
information, data. It's going to carry it. So if it carries it as an ordinal or a rune and it's uncharged and the net miners don't make money, or if the miners make money, it carries the data either way, right?
When Bitcoin was first designed, that wasn't even an issue. That it's only become an issue since Taproot was introduced. So, and the point I'm making is the fact that they made a change that they didn't think would be a problem, and then it's had these unintended consequences that they need to correct. The political system works in the same way. They introduce a law, and then they need another law to correct the unintended consequences of the previous law that they put in place. And that's part of the madness that we're living in with the fiat system right now. And you're starting to introduce the same kind of problem into Bitcoin. It's just that Bitcoin is earlier. So it seems like, it's going to be a better solution. And based on, the simple design you had in the first place, it was great. But, we've still got the problem that, you need Lightning for everyday transactions. Lightning is not straightforward to use. The main Bitcoin, it's straightforward to use, but it's not straightforward to use behind the scenes. It's actually quite complicated. And this issue with Knots and Core has really disrupted a number of people's nodes behind the scenes. I mean, certainly the node that I was using, the channels have been cancelled so that, people could go onto the new Knots thing. And the thing is, when you're a novice in these things, it's hard enough to kind of get to square one. And then it's almost like I'm right back to the beginning and having to manage, all of the things I'd learned so far. I've now got to stop and learn it all again. If Bitcoin's actually going to be a global reserve currency and useful, and actually get to the stage where it disrupts the financial system, it needs to be usable. And we were just starting to make progress on that. And then this whole knots thing has really disrupted that. And it holds things back, these constant changes, the fact that, the additional data is already clogging up people's nodes. I mean, these things are actually a problem. And the thing is, so many people are focused on the price and the fact that it's done so well. They're assuming that it's going to continue to do well without realizing that actually all of these things happening behind the scenes are undermining what Bitcoin actually is. It's just that not enough people have caught up with what's happening yet for it to really kind of hit the I mean, the ETFs have just about figured out that Bitcoin is this really great thing, and they're investing for the future based on what's happened in the past without understanding Bitcoin's story, what made it successful and profitable in the past. You've got a number of people in Bitcoin who've been holding it forever because they liked the idea of what it was in the past. But, as these changes take place, you might sniff at the people who are making a fuss about these images. But what if some of the people who are offended are people who've been holding Bitcoin forever and they suddenly go, right, I'm out. So, it does have an impact, and it has an impact on the price as well. So, yeah, I think it's really troublesome what's happening. I really do.
I do think that's bound to happen anyway, though, as Bitcoin falls out of favor and people realize what a rebel currency it really is, and Wall Street realizes it. I think that all the gains that we've made in the public square will be rolled back, and there'll be a dark period of Bitcoin. And everyone will say, oh, that's dead. They don't use that at Wall Street anymore. And then 5 years later, 10 years later, they'll check in and it'll still be there and it'll come back. Let's go to the chat just a little bit and talk to Starship Schrodinger's Destiny. He says right here, we were talking about CSAM. My node may record the fact of one party paying another for a child sex slave or whatever, but it does not contain the crime itself, only the record of it. The trouble with the CSAM is that the image is the crime. He says CSAM laws are unlike all other laws. They're like the weeping angels in Doctor Who. An image of the crime itself becomes the crime. So that does sound very bad. There's an additional problem there that, as I understand the Lightning Network, the funds do actually pass through, like handing a hot dog through a stadium. So in the Lightning Network, it is possible that you would be in the path of paying for the child sex slave. So then you would be presumably an accomplice to the thing. But this all seems like stuff that's going to get worked out digitally, because there's going to be so much of this, so many hot dogs being passed around. To hold everyone accountable for having a hot dog will be ridiculous. And I think in the same way with the blockchain, it'll probably go down to the same way. Everyone will have a copy of it. Everyone will have all the bad data, and everyone will just kind of accept this. And it's
I
super
don't think
hard
that's
because
true.
I think the current internet is that way. I think that the current internet is full of bad data and it's full of good data, and we just call it the internet, and we don't get upset about it anymore. No one's leaving the internet. I'm forking the internet and going to internet 2, where a committee will determine which images are acceptable on my internet 2. It's not going to work. But anyway, we got to keep going. We're going to move on to issue 2. Issue 2, Bitcoin crash wipes $1.7 billion off the board, but analysts still predict a surge to $135,000 a coin. Traders remain optimistic about the cryptocurrency hitting new records despite a major crash. On Monday, Bitcoin experienced its biggest sell-off of the year, wiping out $1.7 billion in bullish bets. Some analysts believe this crash could actually act as a market reset, potentially pushing Bitcoin to $135,000. Thomas Hunt, what do you think? Well, I took a look at this crash like everyone else, and I was shocked. But then again, I go back to that whole thing where I watch nothing but politics news, and then I think that the politics won't affect us. In a lot of ways, this crash is people selling and getting set up for the potential government shutdown in the United States. It's unfortunate. I don't want to talk about it, but it does seem like the Republican-led House, the Republican-led Senate, and the Republican president cannot agree on a budget or a continuing resolution to keep the United States government going. And they might disagree with so many of the things the government does that they're willing to shut it down anyway. And that's going to happen, which of course is going to wreck the stock markets. If you're invested in the stock market, you've got to sell some of your Bitcoin and your other cryptocurrencies so you can cover your stock bets, so on and so forth. Also, there does seem to be this kind of thing where the suckers keep getting fleeced. And I'm sorry if you're out there and you're a sucker, but these people who keep saying Bitcoin is dead, and then they bet on the Bitcoin short position, and then they lose all their money. And then a few weeks later, they're very optimistic. And they're like, Bitcoin's going to the moon, it's going up forever. And they bet on the long position, and then they lose their money. These crazy swings are caused by this, swing of optimism. Last week, 2 weeks ago, everyone loved Bitcoin. This week, everybody's not so sure. So it is strange again to see these articles, and I've seen them since, Bitcoin goes to 20 and it's going to go back to 10, then go to 35. And you say, oh, that's insane. Like, that's just insane. But maybe they're right. Maybe we go down a little and then we come right back up again, like it's done so many times. Victoria Jones, everyone's favorite topic. What do you think about the price of Bitcoin?
It's looking good. It's looking bad, actually. I think we could have topped already for this cycle. I mean, certainly timing wise, we're at around that stage. The article, obviously, that was predicting that we go to 135 was based on the price staying above 117. It's now at 109. So, yeah, not ideal. And like I say, with Core 30 being introduced just next week, I think more people will be upset about it than you think. So I don't think it's good for, I don't think it's, I don't think this, the whole argument and the way in which Bitcoin Core has responded to the complaints is good at all. So, yep. So I'm not optimistic in the near future, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Well, as they said in Hudsucker Proxy, volatility allows the more timid investors to exit the market. And I think we're going to see that again. As in that movie, the company Hudsucker rebounded, created many fine products, and had no trouble after that. But in the short term, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know who does. The magic Bitcoin 8 ball, the source of all truth and knowledge in this universe. Victoria, will the price be higher or lower this week? It sounds like you're saying lower.
I think so, yeah.
I still think higher. I think we bounce. And if we don't bounce, we go down. And then we bounce. Bounce, bounce, bounce. That's all we do. We just correct and bounce. Now, the ball. Will the price be higher this time next week? As I see it, yes. As I see it, yes. The ball is optimistic. Moving on to issue 3. Well, we don't have the ad for World Crypto Network. Hold on a sec. We need an advertisement. Being told we need an advertisement. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got 4,580 videos. You could watch them for 3 months, 22 days, and 19 hours consecutively without sleeping at worldcryptonetwork.com. Issue 3, Trump's administration's $20 billion bailout for Argentina's Milei raises eyebrows. We all remember Argentina taken over by the libertarian Milei, who is going to run it with libertarian policies. It turned out that he ran the libertarian country right into the ground, and now they need $20 billion to bail them out. This, of course, makes no sense after the Trump administration canceled USAID, which helped many countries and many people, and now we're going to give all of our money to Argentina to try to bail it out. As it says here, the president vowed to fix the economy. Then there came a crisis. They slashed inflation and spending, all the austerity, cutting off Argentina. Meanwhile, crypto adoption surges. So once again, bad for Argentina, bad for the government of Argentina, but Bitcoin doesn't care. Victoria Jones, what do you think about Argentina and the Trump administration's plans to bail them out with $20 billion?
Well, there's a famous saying that goes, charity begins at home. And, I don't think the America is in a position to be bailing out other countries when it's got so many of its own issues that need sorting out. So, yeah, it seems a bit bonkers to me, but hey ho.
Well, especially just months ago, all the savings of Doge, and we're going to fire all these people. They said in the news just yesterday, they're hiring most of them back. Most of the government employers are being hired back. Meanwhile, I don't know if they're going to reopen things like the National Oceans Administration and NOAA that did all the weather reports, the weather satellites, all the rotten food in the barriers. And again, the idea that USAID might have been run poorly, might have had some waste, but the idea was that the United States tried to help the whole world, and we spent a lot of money on it. But now we're going to spend all our money just to help Argentina, which is great for Argentina. But it seems we would have been more effective helping the entire world, more of a positive thing. Like there's this idea that if you look in a poor person's house and they have a bag full of rice that says USAID on the side, they're like, the United States isn't so bad. They gave me that bag of rice. We should be that country, the country that gives away nice things. And instead, we're just going to bail out Argentina, which I predicted on this show would fail and failed predictably when they tried to put the libertarian ideas into practice and wreck the economy, wreck the peso. They tried to pump up the peso, it didn't work. Meanwhile, Bitcoin behind the scenes, never any problems for Bitcoin, doesn't affect Bitcoin at all. We don't get to choose our friends, whether it's the winners in El Salvador or the losers in Argentina. Bitcoin doesn't care. Victoria, any more on this, or the exciting $20 billion that Trump's going to spend? How also we've been taking over companies. We got 10% of Intel. I think we should get 10% of an Nvidia. We're taking over TikTok.
But wasn't that Japan? Isn't that what Japan's strategy when they found that they were overly in debt? They started buying everyone's stocks. in
Well,
order
that
to.
would be one thing. I think we just went in with a gun and took 10%. So, right, and it's unfortunate because Intel is failing. So we took a sinker. We took 10% of a bad company, similar to when they took those percentages of the car companies, General Motors and so forth, which actually turned out they got the money back on that one. So I
Mm.
don't know, but it's just a strange climate where on one side they like cut off all the aid, and on the other side, this guy who's obviously an ally of the administration, obviously ideologically libertarian and so forth, gets a huge bailout. And apparently there's nothing we can do. I don't know why this money doesn't go through Congress. We've kind of lost control of what's supposed to happen here in the government in the United States. But that's a much larger issue.
Well, especially if they're facing another government shutdown because they can't agree
Exactly. And that's
on
going to
the
cost us a fortune. And that's going to, if you have billions of dollars for another country, but you don't have the government shutdown, at least to get the Democrats on board, which again are not needed. The Republicans own all three branches of government and the Supreme Court. Whatever you want, you can do anything you want. To get the Democrats on board, they want money for healthcare. They don't want people to be kicked off healthcare, which again, this $20 billion could probably do that. I remember when I was mad that they cut $500 million of cancer research because it's for mRNA vaccines, which they disagree with politically. Scientifically, they seem great. But now it's just, 10 times that, 20 times that. Like it just doesn't make sense. I know there's lots of money in foreign affairs and so forth, and we don't want the government of Argentina or the economy to collapse. Also, it's proposed to be a political loan. The idea that it would help Milei win re-election, which is also just, I thought we could learn
yeah.
something from all the 60s and 70s and all the backing, all the dictators and all the bad dictator. Like he's a bad dictator, but we back him because he agrees with us. And I was like, that was a lesson, right? All the CIA and everyone should be reading all those books about those things and the literal banana republics and so forth. Sugar companies taking over our countries. But I guess we're going to just do it again. It's funny. But let's move on to issue 4, something lighter, finally. Pete Davidson and Casey Affleck team up with Doug Liman on Bitcoin thriller film Killing Satoshi. As the article from Variety says, Satoshi Nakamoto is a man whose very existence remains hotly debated. Now the Bitcoin creator is getting the big screen treatment. Doug Liman, the Bourne Identity, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, has signed on to direct Killing Satoshi, a conspiracy thriller that looks to unravel one of the most enduring mysteries of the 21st century, the secret identity of Satoshi Nakamoto, and why the answer threatens the global power structure. I don't know about that part. Oscar winner Casey Affleck and Pete Davidson will star in the film. Their character descriptions being kept under wrap. Victoria Jones, what do you think? Another Bitcoin movie. We had The Silk Road on the big screen, which famously showed more of the FBI agent than Ross and kind of made them all out to be criminals. What do you think about this idea here of killing Satoshi?
Well, it sounds like it'll be, quite an interesting film. I mean, obviously, the entire story of Bitcoin is fascinating, which is why it has so many fans. So yeah, I'm sure they can make a really good drama out of it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with.
It does sound interesting. I'm not sure about the whole global power structure. I mean, if Satoshi worked for a government agency or if the CIA has all the Bitcoin or what direction they're going to go, but it sounds like a great crew. Doug Liman has been making wonderful films since Go, and much earlier, Born Identity was good too. I think Pete Davidson could be funny. I'm not sure why he's in there. And Casey Affleck's a kind of a serious actor now, I guess. I still remember him in Good Will Hunting. He swallowed a bug. But yeah, it sounds great. Killing Satoshi. Not sure about the title and all the things. Has the potential to be kind of stupid. Kind of could be a James Bondy kind of thing. Like they're chasing Satoshi around and he's hiding and he's running and he's hiding and he's running and he's hiding. And there's a lot of running and hiding. But we'll see how it goes. I hope for the best.
I think it would be good to imagine what it must have been like to be Satoshi and to have the whole thing, because of course everyone loves a good mystery, and because we don't actually know the story, I can imagine many people being fascinated by thinking, what must it have been like to be Satoshi and to now be sitting on a fortune of 64 million and to never have actually touched it? I mean, there has to be quite a remarkable personality. So it'll be interesting to see how they depict that character, because there's many directions they could go with it.
I'd like to see it as a heist film. Satoshi is Prometheus. He works at a government lab for the CIA. They have Bitcoin. They're running it internally. They're testing it. They don't plan to release it. They're probably going to mothball it like any other weapon system. But Satoshi has an idea. What if I could get this and steal it and leak it? And then it's like Mission Impossible. It's a heist. He has to break into the servers, and the clock's going, and the download meter. Do 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 do. Is he gonna get out in time? And he's making small talk like Chelsea Manning or whatever, pretending he's listening to his headphones. And all of that writes itself. So that would be great. And then they chase him around, like you say, because maybe he releases it and he doesn't know what's going to happen, and then he can't unrelease it, similar to this Taproot upgrade. But yeah, it could be fun. I hope it's great. Let us know in the audience what you guys think about killing Satoshi. Let us know in the comments down below if you made it this far into the video. For all you know, it's another one of these books by Bill O'Reilly, who wrote Killing Kennedy and killing a dozen other things, killing Jesus, I think, in this weird quasi-historical series of books that he wrote. So I assume it's nothing to do with that. I don't think that conservative commentator Bill O'Reilly is attached to write it, but still, we'll keep an eye on it. And again, we're reporting at the very peak of media journalism here with Variety on the Bitcoin group here with the big new movie. That's how big we've gotten in Bitcoin. But we've reached the end of the show. We're going to go to predictions or story of the week. Victoria Jones, do you have a prediction or a story of the week?
No, I don't. Everything on my website has kind of come to a halt as a result of this whole core knots thing. We were working on some educational videos to teach people how to run their own nodes, but of course, everything we've worked on so far is now pretty much redundant. So, waiting to see how things play out before picking up on it again. But the next thing I'm due to be involved in is I'm speaking at the Bitfest conference that's due in Manchester. So yeah, I guess I've got a bit more time to work on that talk. But yeah, no newsletters or any new videos for the time being.
Well, and check out Bitfest at bitfest.uk. There's still 4 days left to get discounted tickets to Bitfest. It's going to be cold, but I'm going to be there. And I've got a couple of things. I've got a story of the week. Europe's cookie law messed up the internet. Brussels wants to fix it. The European Commission wants to take a bite out of privacy rules that force websites to run cookie banners. As a person who's visited Europe and still has the cookies in his browser and still gets the notices, I'd love for them to get rid of this. This didn't do anything for anyone's privacy. Everyone clicks accept cookie. You just know you're being spied on. Well, you can click reject as well, but most of the time it doesn't load or it doesn't work. But still, it's one more button on every website everywhere. How about a thing where you could just say reject all cookies, and then it could read the cookie, and the cookie could say reject all cookies. It's a non-technical solution. It's another one of these nanny-ish but kind of well-meaning laws. They're trying to tell you you're being tracked, but in the end, you just get tracked anyway. Surprisingly, Apple has had a lot of success with their do not track button. That Facebook and other companies are very mad about that. It does cut off their source of data. This cookie law doesn't seem to do that. Victoria Jones, you live in the UK near the EU. You've certainly had the cookie notices pop up, and you have worse now in the UK, the blocking access to pornography and other information, which of course always leads to more blocks. What do you think about the cookie law? Will it
Yeah, I have
change?
to say those banners are particularly annoying. But at the same time, there's always a danger here. They kind of take the pendulum to the other extreme in order to make out that they're protecting your privacy. But of course, now this article is saying, maybe we can make it simpler, because by introducing this law, we've created all these problems. So, I mean, I think the people who advocate for privacy, have a valid point. There are dangers in collecting all of our data. But because the solution they implemented created more problems, they get what they want by saying, well, we tried to fix it, but it created so many problems, you're just going to have to accept it. And that's, it's the way of the world, really. But so few people are bamboozled by that, and they don't know how to fight it, that's how they get what they want. So if nothing else, it's worth being aware that that's what's going on. Um, so yeah.
I think it was a good thing. It told people they were being tracked, but it was a bad thing because it told you on every website you're being tracked, and most of the time there was nothing you can do. They are saying in the chat some people run a plugin to block the cookies all the time. I support that idea to support those things, but not everyone can run that. Not everyone is technically savvy and so forth. Let's check in with the chat just a little bit. Schrodinger's Destiny says, but all the Austrian economists were telling me that Argentina was doing amazingly and everyone was happy and prosperous now. Oops. Dipper3R says, in a forum post from 2010, Satoshi did warn against bloating the chain with non-financial data like arbitrary files, saying it clogs nodes and invites abuse. So we did get a warning, but as Victoria said, something in the Taproot upgrade allowed for ordinals and runes, and now we're well into this discussion, which is continuing, and we will talk about again probably next week or in a few more weeks. They say if Satoshi and the RSA and American intelligence can crack most wallets, that could be a problem. Also, a good idea for the movie, something about them cracking Bitcoin, or Satoshi has the way to crack Bitcoin, or if he sold his coins, so they have to kill him. Something like that would be good. Starship says, proceeds of MSTR sale have gone to the builder and work begins on the new bedroom. Sounds like there's a TARDIS theme. I'm excited about that. Doctor Who fan. And they say they just stalk you. Companies should pay attention to the do not track flag. And it's getting better and better. The Apple stuff does actually block people. So it's nice. Also, other story of the week this week is that I've started 3D printing. I got myself a Bamboo Labs A1, and it's pretty easy to use. I've printed a lot of stuff, mostly toys, a couple of kind of useful things, mainly add-ons to the 3D printer, stuff like a trash can that it puts its stuff into and a safety rail. And I'm printing spools for a 3D printer filament. But this is Benchy. It's a boat, but it's a 3D model that lets you benchmark your 3D printer so that you know that it's working. So you can see things like the circle window on the back, the half circle window, the little chimney on the top, the little flagpole in the back, the square. So it has all these different shapes. So it's a benchmark figure. So it's really neat. And 3D printing is much more affordable and reasonable than it used to be. It's about $500 to get this machine. Filament, depending on how much you want, you need a lot of colors. So I think you're going to spend a lot of money on filament. But you get to print things. Objects appear out of nowhere. It's amazing. I used to print, paper, and this is a printing. It's a layer by a layer process. Super fascinating. So let me know in the chat if you're into 3D printing. What's the best model? What kind of things you like to print? And if you're not, maybe time to give it a try. Seems like a fun hobby. Make some toys, make some hopefully useful things around the house. We'll see. There's a couple of Bitcoin models I'd like to get to later on, but I haven't got to yet. But thanks to everybody for joining us. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe down below. Say hello in the chat or the comments. We definitely read them all every week. And until next time, bye bye.
Bye.